A new beginning. The year was 2367, a time when humanity had not only ventured beyond the stars but had firmly established itself among the galaxy's diverse civilizations. Earth was no longer the lone jewel of human ambition. Colonies thrived across distant planets. Among them, Telastra stood out as a lush world, its vibrant forests and crystalline rivers blending harmoniously with ancient alien structures that seemed to hum with life. This was the home of the Illyrians, an ancient and wise species known for their unyielding commitment to peace and their profound connection to the natural world. Ethan Carter, a 22-year-old engineering student from Earth, found himself on Telastra as part of the intergalactic exchange program. It was supposed to be the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to immerse himself in Illyrian culture, learn from their advanced technologies, and represent humanity's best qualities. But for Ethan, it hadn't felt like much of an opportunity at all. Unlike many of his peers, who easily navigated the complex social dances of diplomacy and cultural exchange, Ethan felt out of place. His skills lay in problem-solving, particularly when it came to machines. Circuits, algorithms, and equations were puzzles he could master. People, however, were another matter entirely. The Illyrians, with their ethereal grace and almost spiritual way of thinking, left him feeling clumsy and out of sync. That evening, Ethan wandered the outskirts of Janai, the capital city of Telastra, hoping to clear his mind. The city's glowing spires seemed to stretch endlessly into the violet-hued sky, their surfaces shimmering like liquid silver. The air was thick with the hum of bioluminescent plants and the distant murmurs of alien wildlife. But what caught Ethan's eye wasn't the city, it was the temple. The structure stood at the edge of a forest, its silhouette dark against the shimmering lights of the city. The Illyrians avoided it, and when Ethan had asked why, they only offered vague answers about ancient energies and forbidden knowledge. That made him all the more curious. As he approached, Ethan noticed a faint blue glow pulsing from within the temple. He hesitated for a moment but then shrugged off his reservations. Curiosity had always been his greatest strength and sometimes his greatest flaw. Stepping over the threshold, he found himself in a cavernous chamber. The walls were carved with intricate glyphs that seemed to shift and move when he looked at them directly. At the center of the room hovered a glowing orb, its light shifting through shades of blue and green, like the ocean beneath sunlight. Ethan felt drawn to it. He couldn't explain why, but the orb seemed to hum in a frequency he could almost understand, as though it were alive and calling to him. "What are you doing here?" a voice demanded, sharp and melodic. Ethan spun around and saw her, a tall Illyrian woman with long, silver hair and piercing turquoise eyes. Her expression was a mix of shock and alarm, but there was also a hint of curiosity. She was dressed in flowing robes that shimmered with an iridescent glow, and she carried herself with an air of authority. I didn't mean to intrude," Ethan stammered, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I saw the light and—" "You shouldn't have entered," she interrupted, stepping closer. Her gaze flickered to the orb. "This place is forbidden for a reason. The artifact you see is the core of Eternus, a relic from before our recorded history. It is more powerful than you could imagine and far more dangerous." "Dangerous?" Ethan asked, his curiosity outweighing his fear. "What does it do?" The woman hesitated, as if weighing how much to tell him. "The core is an ancient energy source, created by the Forerunners, a civilization that existed long before ours. It has the power to shape reality, to heal or destroy entire worlds. For millennia, we've guarded it, ensuring it never falls into the wrong hands." Ethan's heart raced. Why would it be in danger now? Before she could answer, a low rumble shook the temple, followed by the sound of distant explosions. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the glow of the core intensified as if responding to the disturbance. The woman's expression darkened. "They've found us," she said grimly. "Who's they?" Ethan asked, his voice rising with panic. "Invaders," she replied. "A splinter faction known as the Carther, who believe strength and domination are the only paths to survival. They've been hunting the core for years. If they take it, they'll wield its power to conquer the galaxy." Ethan's mind raced. He had come to Telastra to learn, not to get caught in the middle of an intergalactic war. Yet here he was, standing next to a mysterious artifact and an even more mysterious alien woman, with enemies closing in. "We have to move," she said, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward a hidden passage at the back of the chamber. "I'm Kara, by the way. And if you want to survive, you'd better keep up." Ethan stumbled after her, his heart pounding. "Wait. Why are you bringing me? I don't know anything about this." "Because you're here now," Kara shot back. "And because the core, it reacted to you." "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, her voice heavy with meaning, "that you might be the only one who can help me protect it." As they fled deeper into the temple, the sounds of the Carthur's attack grew louder. Kara led Ethan through a maze of tunnels, her movements swift and purposeful. She seemed to know exactly where to go, even as the walls trembled and ancient stonework crumbled around them. Finally, they emerged into a hidden chamber. Kara placed her hand on a glyph-covered panel, and the wall slid open to reveal a sleek, glowing transport device. "Get in," she commanded. Ethan hesitated for only a moment before climbing aboard. As the transport hummed to life, Kara turned to him, her turquoise eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his breath catch. "You may not understand it yet, human," she said, "but fate has brought you here for a reason. The core of Eternus has chosen you. And whether you like it or not, you are now part of a fight that will decide the fate of the galaxy." Before Ethan could respond, the transport shot forward into the darkness, carrying them toward an uncertain future. The chase begins. The transport shot through the underground tunnel, its sleek design slicing through the darkness like an arrow. Ethan clung to the edge of his seat, his knuckles white as the speed pressed him back. Beside him, Kara remained calm, her glowing turquoise eyes scanning the displays on the control panel. The hum of the transport was drowned out by the rumble of distant explosions and the unsettling vibration of the ground beneath them. "Where are we going?" Ethan finally managed to ask, his voice strained from the adrenaline coursing through him. Kara's gaze flicked to him, her expression serious. "To the sanctum," she replied. "It's the safest place for the core, and the only location the Carthur won't be able to breach easily." Ethan nodded, though his mind swirled with questions. Why is the core so important? Why not destroy it if it's so dangerous? Kara's grip on the controls tightened. Destroying the core is impossible. It's a relic of the Forerunners, who were far beyond even our understanding of science and energy. The core's existence is fundamental, a force woven into the fabric of the galaxy. If tampered with recklessly, it could destabilize entire star systems, or worse. Ethan let that sink in. The weight of the situation grew heavier. He wasn't just caught up in a conflict, he was now entangled with an artifact capable of reshaping the galaxy. For a moment, he almost wished he'd stayed at the university, struggling with awkward social interactions rather than ancient alien relics and interstellar invaders. The transport jolted suddenly, and Kara cursed under her breath, a melodic sound that somehow managed to carry sharp frustration. Ethan's eyes darted to the rear display, which showed flashes of movement in the tunnel behind them. "They've found us," Kara said grimly, her fingers dancing over the control panel. The transport surged forward, picking up speed, but the faint glow of approaching vehicles continued to grow brighter. "How are they keeping up?" Ethan asked, panic rising in his chest. "This thing feels like it's going 1,000 miles an hour." "The Carthur are relentless," Kara replied, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Their ships are fast, and they don't care about casualties. They'll chase us until there's nothing left of them or us." Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing. "Can't we block the tunnel or slow them down somehow?" Kara hesitated for only a fraction of a second before nodding. "Hold on." She pulled a lever on the transport, and a panel in the back opened. Glowing blue orbs dropped onto the tunnel floor, their surfaces crackling with energy. A moment later, the orbs exploded in a cascade of light, sending shockwaves through the tunnel. The rear display showed the Carthur vehicles veering wildly to avoid the blasts. Several crashed into the tunnel walls, their fiery explosions briefly illuminating the darkness. "That should buy us time," Kara said, her voice steady but tense. "But they'll regroup. They always do." Ethan exhaled shakily, his pulse still pounding in his ears. Who are these Carther, anyway? What do they want with the core? Kara's expression darkened. The Carther were once a part of our society. They believed in strength through power, that peace made us weak. When we rejected their philosophy, they broke away, forming a militaristic faction bent on conquest. The core is their ultimate goal. With it, they could reshape the galaxy to their will, enforce their dominance, and eliminate those who oppose them. Ethan frowned. And you've been fighting them all this time? We've been defending against them, Kara corrected. Our people don't believe in open war. We value harmony above all else. But the Carther don't care about harmony. They only understand power. The transport emerged from the tunnel into a vast underground cavern. Massive crystal formations jutted from the ground and ceiling, their surfaces shimmering with light. In the distance, a towering structure loomed, the sanctum. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, a fusion of natural beauty and advanced design. The building seemed to grow organically from the cavern itself, its spires glowing faintly with an inner light. We're here, Kara said, her voice softening slightly. The sanctum will protect the core if we can reach it in time. As the transport sped toward the entrance, the sound of engines roared behind them. Ethan turned to see a fleet of Carther vehicles spilling into the cavern, their lights cutting through the dim glow of the crystals. They're persistent, Ethan muttered. Kara grimaced. That's one way to put it. The transport skidded to a stop just outside the sanctum. Kara leaped out, the core of Eternus held securely in her hands. Ethan followed, his legs trembling as he took in the enormity of the sanctum up close. The entrance was flanked by two towering statues, their faces worn with age but still radiating an air of solemn authority. This way, Kara urged, leading him toward the entrance. The moment they crossed the threshold, the air seemed to change. It was cooler, denser, and filled with an almost tangible sense of power. The interior of the sanctum was breathtaking. Towering pillars lined the walls, etched with glowing symbols that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the core. The floor was a mosaic of shimmering tiles, reflecting the light in an ever-shifting dance of color. Kara moved quickly, placing the core on a pedestal at the center of the chamber. She began to chant in a language Ethan didn't understand, her voice resonating with the energy of the room. The core responded, its light growing brighter and more stable. What are you doing? Ethan asked, his voice hushed. Activating the sanctum's defenses, Kara replied without looking at him. The core is safest here, but it must be shielded. A deafening crash echoed through the sanctum as the Carther breached the entrance. Ethan's heart sank as heavily armed soldiers poured into the room, their weapons gleaming ominously. Kara's chant faltered, and she turned to Ethan, her eyes blazing with determination. I need more time. Can you hold them off? Ethan blinked, panic gripping him. Me? I'm not a soldier. You're resourceful, Kara said sharply. And the sanctum itself may aid you. Trust it. Before Ethan could protest further, a pulse of light shot from the core, enveloping him in a warm glow. He felt a surge of energy course through his body, filling him with a strange sense of clarity and strength. The Carther advanced, their weapons raised. Ethan clenched his fists, the energy within him begging for release. Whatever the sanctum had done, it had given him a fighting chance, and he intended to use it. As the first wave of soldiers reached him, Ethan stepped forward, ready to face the battle that would decide the fate of the core, the sanctum, and possibly the galaxy itself. The sanctum's awakening. Ethan's heart pounded as the Carther soldiers closed in, their dark armor reflecting the shifting light of the sanctum's glowing walls. The weight of the moment bore down on him, but the energy coursing through his veins demanded action. Whatever the sanctum had done to him, it had awakened something, a connection to the ancient power embedded in this place. The first soldier lunged, a blade of crackling energy in hand. Ethan moved instinctively, dodging the strike with a speed and precision that surprised even him. Before the soldier could recover, Ethan countered with a forceful push, sending the armored figure flying backward into the wall. The impact reverberated through the chamber, and Ethan realized his movements were not his own, they were enhanced, guided by the sanctum itself. Behind him, Kara's chanting grew louder, her voice resonating with the energy of the room. The core of Eternus pulsed brighter, casting long shadows across the mosaic floor. Ethan spared a glance at her, seeing the strain on her face as she focused every ounce of her strength on activating the sanctum's defenses. "Hold them back," she shouted, her voice tight with urgency. "I just need a little more time." Ethan turned back to the advancing Carther soldiers, his fear replaced by a fierce determination. He reached out toward a fallen weapon, a sleek, alien-looking staff left behind by one of the soldiers he had disarmed. As his fingers wrapped around it, the weapon seemed to come alive, its surface glowing faintly as if responding to his touch. The next wave of Carther soldiers charged. Ethan raised the staff, and without thinking, he swung it in a wide arc. A burst of energy erupted from the weapon, sending a shockwave that knocked the soldiers off their feet. He staggered slightly from the force of it but quickly steadied himself, his confidence growing. The Carther regrouped, their leader barking orders in a guttural language. Ethan noticed their tactics shifting, they were spreading out, trying to flank him. He gritted his teeth, realizing he couldn't rely solely on the sanctum's mysterious energy to protect him. He needed to think, to act strategically. The chamber itself seemed to respond to his resolve. The glyphs on the walls glowed brighter, and the floor beneath the Carther rippled as if alive. One soldier stumbled, his footing lost as the tiles beneath him shifted, creating a jagged rise that knocked him off balance. Another soldier's weapon misfired as the glowing symbols on his armor faded, as though the sanctum was selectively disabling their technology. Ethan's mind raced. He could feel the sanctum's presence, an ancient intelligence woven into the fabric of the structure. It wasn't just a fortress, it was a living entity, and it was on their side. He focused on that connection, letting his thoughts align with the sanctum's energy. "Help me," he whispered, unsure if the sanctum could hear him. "Show me what to do." The answer came not in words but in a surge of understanding. Ethan suddenly knew the layout of the chamber, the positions of the Carther soldiers, and the weak points in their formation. He moved with purpose, using the staff to deflect incoming fire and redirect the energy blasts back toward their attackers. The battle became a blur of motion. Ethan dodged and countered, each movement precise and calculated. The Carther were relentless, but so was he. For the first time in his life, he felt truly capable, like he was exactly where he was meant to be. One of the soldiers, larger than the others and clad in heavier armor, stepped forward. He carried a massive weapon that crackled with dark energy. Ethan braced himself as the soldier aimed and fired. The blast hurtled toward him, a swirling mass of destructive force. Instinctively, Ethan raised the staff, and the energy struck it head-on. Instead of shattering, the staff absorbed the blast, glowing brighter with each passing second. With a shout, Ethan swung the staff forward, releasing the stored energy in a concentrated beam. It struck the soldier square in the chest, sending him sprawling across the chamber. The remaining Carther hesitated, their confidence faltering as they watched their strongest warrior fall. Behind Ethan, Kara's chanting reached a crescendo. The core of Eternus pulsed one final time, and then the entire chamber was bathed in a golden light. The glyphs on the walls surged with energy, creating a lattice of protective barriers that encased the sanctum. The Carther soldiers who hadn't already fled found themselves trapped, their weapons malfunctioning as the sanctum's energy overwhelmed their systems. "It's done!" Kara called out, her voice filled with relief and exhaustion. Ethan turned to her, his chest heaving from the effort of the fight. "What now?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Kara approached the core, her gaze steady despite the weariness in her expression. "The sanctum is fully activated. The core is protected, and the Carther won't be able to breach these defenses. At least, not for a long time." The remaining Carther soldiers, realizing their defeat, began retreating toward the chamber's entrance. Ethan didn't pursue them. He could sense the sanctum's energy shifting, sealing off the paths they had used to enter. They were no longer a threat for now. As the last of the soldiers disappeared, silence settled over the chamber. The golden light dimmed, and the energy in the air grew calmer. Ethan let out a long breath, his body trembling from the adrenaline crash. Kara placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "You fought well," she said softly. "Better than I expected." Ethan managed a weak laugh. I don't think I've ever fought at all before today. Kara's lips quirked into a faint smile. Perhaps the Sanctum saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself. Ethan looked at her, his expression growing serious. What happens now? The Carther will come back, won't they? Kara nodded, her gaze distant. They will. But the core is safe for now. And with the Sanctum's defenses, we have time to prepare. Ethan hesitated, his mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. He had come to Telastra to learn, to explore, to expand his understanding of the universe. He had never expected to become part of a battle for its survival. But as he looked at Kara, at the core, and at the glowing symbols on the walls, he realized something had changed within him. He wasn't just an observer anymore. He was part of this world, this fight. And he wasn't going to walk away. I'll help you, he said, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. Whatever it takes. Kara studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded, a glimmer of respect in her eyes. Good. Because this is only the beginning. Secrets of the core. The golden light of the Sanctum faded into a calm, ambient glow, leaving the chamber silent except for the faint hum of the core of Eternus. Ethan leaned against one of the towering pillars, his breath still ragged from the fight. Across the chamber, Kara was meticulously examining the core, her hands hovering just above its pulsating surface. The intricate patterns on its crystalline exterior shifted subtly, as though responding to her presence. Ethan finally broke the silence. What now? The Carther might be gone, but we both know they'll be back. Kara glanced at him, her turquoise eyes reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and determination. They will, she admitted, her voice calm but edged with resolve. But for now, the core is safe, and the Sanctum's defenses will hold. That gives us time to understand why the core responded to you. Ethan straightened, caught off guard. Responded to me? What does that mean? I thought the core was just, well, ancient technology. It's more than that, Kara said, stepping closer. The core isn't just a machine or a tool. It's alive in a way we don't fully comprehend. It doesn't merely function, it chooses. For millennia, it's been dormant, protecting its secrets. Yet the moment you touched it, everything changed. Ethan frowned. I don't get it. Why me? I'm just a student. There's nothing special about me. That's where you're wrong, Kara replied, her tone firm. You've been underestimated your whole life, perhaps even by yourself. But the core sees potential, something rare and powerful. It chose you for a reason. Ethan shook his head, frustration bubbling to the surface. Chosen for what? To fight? To protect it? I barely know what I'm doing, Kara. I'm not a warrior, and I'm definitely not a hero. Kara regarded him with a steady gaze, unshaken by his outburst. Neither was I, she said quietly. When the Carther began their rebellion, I was a scholar, not a leader. I spent my days studying ancient texts, trying to unravel the mysteries of our past. But when my people needed me, I had to become something more. Just like you do now. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but the weight of her words stopped him. He had seen her bravery, her unwavering resolve in the face of danger. If she could rise to the occasion, maybe he could too. Kara turned back to the core, her expression softening. There's something else you need to understand. The core doesn't just choose arbitrarily. It connects. It forges a bond with those it deems worthy, granting them access to its knowledge and power. That connection is why you were able to fight the Carther the way you did. Ethan hesitated, the memory of the battle still fresh in his mind. He had felt something, an energy that wasn't his own, guiding him, empowering him. But the idea that it was tied to the core felt almost too big to grasp. So what happens now, he asked finally. Do I just keep fighting until the Carther give up? Kara shook her head. Fighting is only part of it. The core holds knowledge, ancient secrets that could help us not only defend it but also understand why the Carther are so desperate to claim it. If we can uncover those secrets, we might find a way to end this conflict once and for all. Ethan crossed his arms, skepticism creeping into his voice. And how exactly do we uncover these secrets? It's not like the core comes with a user manual. Kara smiled faintly, a rare glimmer of humor breaking through her serious demeanor. No, it doesn't. But the sanctum does. She gestured toward one of the chamber's walls, where the glowing glyphs had shifted into new patterns. Ethan noticed for the first time that they formed a kind of map, intricate pathways radiating outward from the central chamber. These markings, Kara explained, are part of the sanctum's archive. The Forerunners built this place not just to house the core but to preserve their knowledge. If we follow the map, it should lead us to the inner sanctum, a place where the Forerunners' most valuable information is stored. Ethan stared at the glowing patterns, feeling both intrigued and uneasy. Let me guess. It's not going to be as simple as following a glowing trail, is it? Kara's smile faded. No. The sanctum is filled with defenses, puzzles, traps, and tests designed to ensure only the worthy can access its secrets. And now that the core has chosen you, I suspect those tests will focus on you. Ethan sighed, the weight of the situation settling heavily on his shoulders. Great. Ancient alien tests. Exactly what I signed up for. Despite his sarcasm, he followed Kara as she began tracing the map. The path led them deeper into the sanctum, through narrow corridors lined with glowing symbols. The air grew cooler, and the hum of the core faded into a distant vibration, replaced by a faint, rhythmic pulse that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. As they walked, Kara spoke softly, her voice almost reverent. The Forerunners were unlike any civilization we've known. They understood the fabric of existence in ways we can only dream of. But their wisdom came with a price. They feared their own creations, the power they had unlocked. That's why they hid the core and built the sanctum, to ensure their knowledge wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. Ethan glanced at her. And yet, here we are, trying to unlock it. Sometimes the only way to protect something is to understand it, Kara replied. If we don't, the Carther will stop at nothing to take it, and they won't show the same restraint. They reached a large, circular chamber, its ceiling arched high above them. In the center stood a pedestal surrounded by a ring of floating crystals, each one glowing with a faint, shifting light. The walls were covered in glyphs that pulsed in sync with the crystals. This is the first test, Kara said, stepping cautiously into the room. The trial of insight. The Forerunners believed that only those who could solve their puzzles deserved access to their knowledge. Ethan stepped forward, studying the crystals and the glyphs. What kind of puzzle are we talking about here? Sudoku or something worse? Kara gave him a pointed look. Worse. The glyphs form a sequence, and the crystals are the key. You'll need to arrange them in the correct order to unlock the path forward. Ethan groaned. Of course. Alien Sudoku. But as he stepped closer to the crystals, the same energy he had felt during the fight with the Carther surged through him again. The glyphs on the walls seemed to shift and align, their meaning becoming clearer. He reached out toward one of the crystals, and it floated into his hand, its surface cool and smooth. He placed the crystal on the pedestal, and a soft hum filled the room. Encouraged, he began working, moving the crystals in what felt like the right sequence. Kara watched silently, her expression unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, the final crystal clicked into place. The room trembled, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a new passage. You did it, Kara said, her voice filled with quiet approval. Ethan exhaled, his nerves finally easing. One test down, who knows how many more to go. Kara stepped beside him, her gaze fixed on the dark corridor ahead. This is just the beginning. The deeper we go, the closer we get to the truth. But be prepared, what lies ahead will challenge us in ways we can't predict. Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. He didn't fully understand why the core had chosen him, but if this was his path, he would see it through. Together, he and Kara ventured deeper into the sanctum, ready to face whatever trials awaited them in the heart of its mysteries, the trial of unity. The corridor ahead felt like stepping into another dimension. The air grew dense, not with humidity but with an almost tangible energy. The glowing glyphs that had been their guide so far shifted, forming intricate patterns that rippled like waves. Each step echoed as if the sanctum itself was observing, anticipating their every move. Ethan's nerves prickled with unease, and he glanced at Kara, who seemed unfazed, her focus steady. "Any idea what we're walking into?" Ethan asked, his voice low. Kara tilted her head slightly, her silver hair catching the faint light from the glyphs. The Forerunners valued not just knowledge but also unity. "The next trial will likely test how well we can work together." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Unity? Like teamwork?" "More than that," Kara replied. "The Forerunners believed in symbiosis, strength through connection. This trial will push us to trust one another completely." Ethan gave a half-hearted laugh. "Great. Nothing bonds people like ancient alien puzzles designed to kill them." They reached another chamber, but this one was unlike the first. It was massive, with walls that seemed to stretch into infinity. The floor was divided into floating platforms of varying sizes, suspended over a seemingly bottomless abyss. Above them, orbs of light hovered, each pulsing with a rhythmic glow that seemed almost hypnotic. In the center of the chamber stood a towering obelisk etched with glyphs that shifted too quickly for Ethan to follow. "This doesn't look friendly," he muttered. Kara stepped onto the nearest platform, her movements cautious. "The platforms and the orbs are part of the trial. We'll need to activate the obelisk in the center, but the path to reach it will constantly change. And the glyphs, they will give us instructions." Ethan frowned. "Instructions? I can barely keep up with how fast they're shifting." Kara gestured for him to follow. "That's where trust comes in. You'll rely on me to interpret the glyphs, and I'll rely on you to act without hesitation." Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second, the weight of her words settling on him. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped onto the platform behind her. It wobbled slightly under his weight but held steady. Together, they moved to the next platform, then another. Each step required careful balance, and Ethan quickly realized the platforms weren't static, they shifted and spun with every movement. As they approached the obelisk, the orbs above began to emit beams of light, creating a web of moving energy across the chamber. The platforms reacted to the beams, some glowing brighter, others fading into near invisibility. Ethan's pulse quickened. "This just got a lot more complicated," he said. Kara glanced up, her expression calm but intense. "The beams are part of the trial. They're showing us which platforms are safe. Follow my lead." She pointed to a glowing platform a few feet away, and Ethan followed her without hesitation. The moment they landed, the platform behind them dissolved into thin air. Ethan's stomach churned as he stared into the abyss below. "Okay," he said, his voice tight, no pressure. Kara smirked faintly. "Keep moving." They continued their precarious journey, Kara deciphering the glyphs as they moved and Ethan acting on her instructions. Each platform brought them closer to the obelisk, but the trial's difficulty increased with every step. The beams of light moved faster, the platforms spun more erratically, and the glyphs shifted in increasingly complex patterns. At one point, Ethan slipped, his foot catching the edge of a dissolving platform. For a heart-stopping moment, he dangled over the abyss, his fingers gripping the edge. Kara was there in an instant, pulling him up with surprising strength. "You're heavier than you look," she said, her tone dry. Ethan laughed nervously, his heart racing. "I'll take that as a compliment." They reached the final platform before the obelisk. The glyphs above it pulsed with a blinding light, their shifting patterns slowing to reveal a single, clear symbol, a circle split in half, one side glowing white, the other black. Kara's expression grew serious. "The glyph of unity," she said softly. "This is the final step." Ethan frowned. "What does it mean?" Kara stepped closer to the obelisk, studying the glyph. "It's a test of balance. The Forerunners believed that true unity required both strength and vulnerability, action and reflection. To activate the obelisk, we'll need to channel those dualities." Ethan gave her a blank look. "And how do we do that?" Kara placed her hands on the obelisk and gestured for Ethan to do the same. "By trusting each other completely. When I say to push your energy into the obelisk, I'll guide the flow, but if we're not in sync, the energy will destabilize. Destabilize? Ethan asked. As in explode? Kara didn't answer, which wasn't exactly comforting. Still, Ethan placed his hands on the obelisk, the cool surface humming under his palms. Ready? Kara asked. Not even a little, Ethan muttered. But let's do this. Kara began chanting softly, her voice resonating with the hum of the obelisk. Ethan felt a strange warmth spread through his hands, like a current of energy flowing from the obelisk into him. Kara's chanting grew louder, and the glyphs on the obelisk pulsed in time with her voice. Now, she said sharply. Ethan focused, pushing his energy into the obelisk. The warmth in his hands intensified, spreading up his arms and into his chest. It was both exhilarating and overwhelming, like standing in the eye of a storm. He could feel Kara's presence, her energy intertwining with his, creating a perfect balance. The obelisk began to glow brighter, the glyphs stabilizing into a single, unified pattern. A deep rumble echoed through the chamber as the obelisk emitted a beam of light that shot upward, illuminating the entire room. The floating platform solidified, and the beams of light from the orbs disappeared. We did it, Kara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan staggered back, his body trembling from the effort. That was intense. Kara nodded, her expression softening. You did well. Better than I expected. Ethan managed a weak smile. I'll take that as a compliment. The room shifted again, the walls rippling like water. A doorway appeared in the far wall, glowing with a soft golden light. The path to the inner sanctum, Kara said, her voice tinged with awe. Ethan took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. Together, they stepped through the doorway, leaving the trial of unity behind and venturing deeper into the sanctum's ancient mysteries.